Welcome to the Object-Oriented UX podcast, a podcast about tackling complexity head-on, gracefully organizing massive amounts of information, and designing scalable, future-proof, and of course, naturally intuitive object-oriented user experiences. An OUXer is a powerful blend of information architect, business analyst, facilitator, and UX strategist. If this sounds like you or what you aspire to, you are so in the right place. I'm Sophia Prater, UX designer, chief evangelist of Object-Oriented UX, and your host. Let's jump into it.
What's up, OUXers? Today I'm getting into step 4 of the ORCA process, attribute discovery. This is the 4th episode in this ORCA series that I am slowly getting through this year, speeding up here at the end of the year. And here in this ORCA series, this is where I go over some tips and tricks for each step of the ORCA process. In this episode, I'm not going to go over the details of how to object map, which is really the main thing that you are doing in step 4 of the ORCA process. But instead, I'm going to talk about 15 attributes that you'll want to consider for every single object in your system. Think about this like a gut check or a question guide for each object. You can kind of go through these 15 attributes and ask, do I need this? Yes, no. And these are the superstars of attributes that we just see over and over again for all sorts of different objects. Also, I have a little gift for you. If you go to OUX.com/resources/attribute discovery, that link, of course, will be in the show notes. I have a totally free PDF version of this guide, these 15 attributes. Yes, you're going to be trading your email address as things work. But once you sign up for the OUX newsletter, you'll not only get this attribute checklist, but you'll also get the OUX launch guide, which is this 55-page PDF that's going to get you started in OUX. And if you are already on the OUX newsletter, no worries. You put your email address in as long as it's the same email address that we already have. We're not going to re-sign you up, and you're not going to get our onboarding emails again. So we do have 4 onboarding emails basically to get you started once you join the newsletter. And then you just have our weekly emails that come out most Mondays. It's a really good place to be. So anyways, hope you decide to get that guide. It's going to be a really nice printable for you to just look at as you're going into object mapping. Okay, so to recap, ORCA stands for Objects, Relationships, Calls to Action, and Attributes. And we have 4 main rounds of the ORCA process where we go over and we think about objects, relationships, calls to action, attributes at deeper and deeper levels of fidelity. Okay, so we're still in this first round, step 4, the A of the discovery round, where we're just really trying to figure out the lay of the land here. We're often coming up with more questions than we are answers. And that is, I always say, a feature, not a bug. All right. We want to come up with these questions as early as possible so we can get right to the heart of complexity. And we're not asking these really important structural questions later in the process when we're playing with pixels. Okay. We want to be asking these tough questions when we're still playing with sticky notes. Okay. So each of these episodes, I will say that the way that it's turned out, it's not really a beginner explainer. These episodes in this ORCA series are more for folks that already know the basics of the process. Maybe they've read that OUX launch guide and they're looking for some quick tips. And this is also stuff that like maybe isn't covered as in detail in the OUX masterclass. This is almost like a supplement to the OUX masterclass, where the OUX masterclass is where we go really in depth on the how-to and the theory behind each of these steps. And this is as I'm going through this, and it's what do I do in this process? Maybe what are some things that can supplement that? So if you are already in the OUX masterclass, these are really good episodes to be listening to. Just there's going to be some not repeat, but some like reinforcement of the things that are already in the masterclass, and then some new things that are just more like how I actually practice it, how I actually practice this step. On top of that, I do want these episodes to stand alone, but if you do really want a deep dive, you're going to want to enroll in the OUX Masterclass. You can go to OUX.com/masterclass to learn more about that program and all the bells and whistles and all the amazing content that you get and all the support that you get once you enroll in that masterclass. And that masterclass is definitely the first step to joining a certification cohort when certifications open up. Okay, quick recap All right, discovery round. Like I said, the main goals of the discovery round are coming up with questions, realizing all those unknown unknowns, shining your light into all the dark and dirty corners of the thing that you are actually trying to design, and making sure that you at least have full understanding on what you don't know. So you are going to really get the lay of the land on the level of complexity that you're dealing with. You're going to come up with really great questions from the research. As you're taking all the research and everything that you know in, you're going to be able to pop back to the right parties, whether that's UX research or developers or a stakeholder. You're going to be able to pop back really awesome questions. So that's, like, I would say the main goal of the discovery round is to lay out all the pieces of the puzzle and then figure out what pieces of the puzzle are missing. Okay. So, in the first episode of this series, Object Discovery, we talked about noun foraging, and I gave you some of my tips on noun foraging, on how I basically synthesize a bunch of research. So, if you haven't listened to that, you're going to want to go back and check that out. This episode should stand alone, though. During the relationships episode of this ORCA series, I talked about system modeling and how I use system modeling. And then for the C, and then for CTA discovery, that's calls to action, I really got into the CTA matrix and gave some tips on how I use the CTA matrix. And now, like I said, for attribute discovery, we're going to be going over 15 attributes that you will almost always need on almost every object. Of course, there are exceptions, but these are, at least, I would say that these are 15 attributes that you're going to at least want to consider. Even if it's like a 15-second thought experiment, do I need that? Does that make sense? And then the answer might be no, but it's definitely not going to be a waste of time to think about these and go through each of these 15 attributes to see if you're going to need them. Okay. So, yeah, cool. Awesome. Let's get into it. Let's go. Okay. And these are going to get progressively more complicated too, I think. I think that's how I've ordered them. All right. So the first one is a name or a title or a label. This is a user-facing name. The title it's usually created by a human. It can be programmatically created, but if this is a person object, you're going to need a first name. But you're going to want to think, do I need first name and last name? Should those be two different attributes? Do we need a middle initial? If this is an article, this is the article's title. But do you need a long title and also a short title? Okay, when I was at CNN, we had that. We had two different attributes for long full title, and then we had a shorter title as well. So sometimes name slash title slash label does break up into multiple attributes. And when I say it's often or can be programmatically created, it can be programmatically created by other attributes. So for example, events in Calendly, I set up my events in Calendly to auto create the name of the event as it gets scheduled by event type, the word with, and then the person name. So it's actually taking the name of event type, which is a nested object, and the name of the person that has booked that particular event type, and it pulls those two names to auto create the name of the actual event. And for my advanced OUXers out there, what would that be? Is that a junction object? So our event object in Calendly is a junction object between event type and person. So often those junction objects get the name or the title can be auto programmatically created. And that's a wonderful thing to think about once you get into requirements. Okay. The other one is a unique ID. Does that sound redundant? Not really. Okay. So the unique ID is usually some sort of numeric or alphanumeric string of characters that sometimes is user facing and sometimes is not user facing. You usually are going to have one created by the system. For people, usually it's not going to be user facing unless it's maybe an admin or a customer service would probably need like a customer ID or something like that. Depends actually on the system. Now that I say that, I'm thinking about all these apps that I do have a customer ID, which is really helpful for when I'm calling customer service or something like that. So for Delta, I have my SkyMiles number. Okay, that is my unique identification as a Delta customer. I think in GoDaddy.com, where we have our domains, I have a customer ID that every time I call customer service, that's the first thing they ask me to give them is that customer ID. You want that to be really easy to find. I've got a name in Delta. I've got a first name. I've got a middle initial. I've got a last name in Delta, but I also have a SkyMiles number. In a government site, it might be a social security number. In a government business site, it might be my EIN, my employer identification number. That might be for the business. I have business name okay, I might have business name. I might have the doing business as, and then I might have my EIN. Okay, for when I log into the government Georgia site, I'm going to see Sophia VUX LLC. That is my that's my official business name. And then we have the DBA name, the doing business as name, which is Rewired UX. And then I have my EIN. Okay, so all of those are really important. So think unique identifiers. And for my OUXers out there, that's all going to be considered core content. Okay, so yellow sticky note on those because those by definition are these things that identify that particular instance of the object as unique. Okay, and a quick story on unique ID actually not being shown. So I recently did a food order through Google. It was like through Google Maps. It was like order online. I was like, okay, it was like brought to you by DoorDash. But I didn't even log into DoorDash or anything. I just ordered food through Google Maps and it gave me my confirmation and there was no order number on there. And it wasn't me actually picking it up. It was my husband going to drive and pick up the food. So I wanted to give him the order ID because it was like under my name, but I don't know, things go wrong all the time, right? Like him showing up to the Korean place and then being like, what's your order ID? Or this isn't you, this is Sophia and your name is Luke or something like that. So I wanted to take a screenshot or forward him the email so that he could have the order ID. Just CYA, right? The order ID was not visible anywhere. It wasn't visible in the email and it wasn't visible in the confirmation screen. So y'all that have orders as an object within your system, always make sure the order ID, it's a peace of mind for the customer that like, I did order this thing and if I have a problem with it, which so often happens, I know where to find my order ID. Okay, so IDs and title and names. Okay, number 3, date. So this is often a created date, an updated date, a date that the thing was approved, maybe all 3 of those, date that the person joined or something like that. Usually there is some sort of timestamp on that and often multiple timestamps. So thinking about when did something happen to this thing? Very common. Okay. The other thing I'll mention about this to just throw a monkey wrench at you is often something like this is actually a nested object of some sort of transaction object, especially in our enterprise business tools for all my enterprisey OUXers out there. My heart goes out to you dealing with the serious levels of complexity. You will often need a paper trail, digital paper trail of transactions on an object. Okay, so transaction often will become an object in and of itself. It's got structure, who did the thing, when did they do it, and what did they do. Okay, so often the date updated on, let's say, date updated on this memo or something, the memo object, okay? That might actually get pulled from the most recent transaction that is nested inside of that memo. Okay, so a memo has many transactions or zero to many, probably at least one to many transactions. It probably has a created transaction. I'm thinking of, let's see another example. Trello has this. So a Trello card would have transactions on it. I think they call it like activity. So it might be like an activity log is the object, and that would be each little log, right? You've got your list. All right, so activity log is not all of them, right? That would be the list of it. So each activity item would be an object. Okay, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so date, that's number 3. Number 4, author or owner or creator. Who did the thing? Okay, who is the owner of that particular instance of the object? Usually you're going to have something like that, especially for our user-generated objects, okay? Even if it's generated by a content creator on the back end, you probably are going to have that too, all right? System-generated stuff, you probably don't need that. You definitely need that unique ID. System-generated instances, yeah, you might not need the author, but this is a really good thing to think about. So author, owner / creator, maybe all 3 of those. You might have the creator, the owner, and the author as 3 different instances. But who is the person behind this particular instance of this object? And this is another one that can very often be a nested object. Not always, but it can be a nested object. Okay, people are objects within your system then maybe it's not just the name that you're seeing, it's the name and the little picture of that person. And then you can click on their little picture and you go to their profile and you see all the other stuff they created, right? Okay. So number 5 is some sort of visual. So an image, maybe it's a video, maybe it's an icon. So this is a person, this is your profile picture. If it's an article, it is the picture that describes that article, right? So often you'll have some sort of visual representation, okay? And if you have visual representation, that visual is not just decorative, okay? It actually really describes the object. You're probably going to want another. So this is a bonus one. Another attribute, which is the alt text for that image. Okay. If you have multiple images, then we can talk about this image become a nested object. But overall, you're going to want some sort of visual. And if for every instance the visual is non-decorative, then you're probably going to want alt text too. Okay. Number 6. This is a wider one. This is for some sort of popularity or pulse check. Kind of like a success metric. We were talking before recording this. I was talking with my team about this, about how to call this, but pulse is a really good word for this. Some sort of measure of activity. All right. So this might be likes on a post. It might be like the little trending spark graph on a song. It could be usage data, or even, let's say, one of your objects, you're building a system to manage a factory or something. Okay. Or a power plant. You might have valve as an object. You might need like pressure data. Okay. So it's something to basically say, what's going on with this particular instance of the object? Is it really popular? Is it outside of a tolerance? How do we know that we might want to take a look at this particular instance? You could even consider it performance data, whether that performance is, it's a little bit abnormal or it's really good. This could also be multiple attributes. So this is almost like a group of potential attributes. But often, especially if your system has a lot of instances of that object. Okay, so if the user isn't just dealing with 10 instances of the object, but they could be dealing with hundreds or thousands or even millions of instances of that particular object, you're going to want some sort of metering system on it to say, this is the one that should grab your attention. Okay, so that is a bag of worms right there to think about, but definitely something that you're going to want to consider. Okay, number 7 is location. Is this geolocation, an address? This might actually be a nested object that has the geolocation that is getting pulled in. If it's an event, might have a venue, and the venue is actually the thing with the location, right? This can be a nested object, or it can be on the object itself. The question to ask here is, for this particular object, when we're looking at instances of this object, do we need to know where those instances are? Do those instances have a place to them? Really good question to ask. And this is also going to be something that we will be thinking about when we get to the end of my list, where we're going to talk a little bit about privacy. Okay. That's another attribute where we want to think about attribute level privacy. Okay. We'll talk about object level privacy at the end of the list. Okay, saving that little gem, that little cherry for the end. Okay. Location. Think about location. All right. Number 8 is actually number. Number of a key nested object list. Okay, so examples help for this. If the object that we're analyzing is, let's say, space in Mighty Networks, we use Mighty Networks for the OAUX forum. There's spaces. Lots of other apps have spaces. I think Twitter has spaces and Circle has spaces, and space is catch-all object, but space. Okay, so space in Mighty Networks has many members. Okay. One thing that really drives me crazy as a host in Mighty Networks is I can go to a space, I can look at that list of members, I can see that all the nested objects, okay? I can see the nested list of all the members in a space, but it doesn't have a count. It doesn't tell me how many members are in that space. And there are certain use cases where I really need that. Team is another example. So I have a team and I have many employees on this team. You're probably going to want to give the user a count of how many people are on that team. In my course, this is something that I'm really clear about, is that's 2 different sticky notes. We've got the blue sticky note for a space as many members, all right? Okay, that nested object. And then I'm going to get a pink sticky note out, and I'm going to put number of members as a separate attribute, okay? And so you really want to think, actually, as you're looking at your nested objects, do I need a count of how many is many on this particular instance. So what does many mean? Is it 0? Is it 200? Okay, so when we're in requirements and we go through my cat saving fire department, that's something for the OAUX masterclass. When we're going and we're looking at cardinality in depth, we're thinking about the average number, okay? But for that particular object, do I want to actually show the count? Okay, does that make sense? I hope so. Number 9, let me know. If you all have questions on any of this, please join the OAUX forum, okay? We're going to be posting this episode on the OAUX forum, and I am there for Q&A. Also in the OAUX forum, did I say that already? Did I say the URL? Forum.oaux.com, totally free to join. I have monthly Q&A, so if you have any questions about this, go in and let me know what I'm not explaining very well. Okay, so number 9. Roll-ups from your nested objects. Okay, so I've got 67 members in this space. I've got that count that I've got 67 members in this space. Awesome. I might also want to see the percent of those members that are content strategists. Okay, so within Mighty Networks, people can put their role. Okay, they can add that as metadata to the member has metadata of role. Okay, and then do I want that to roll up to the space level? Okay. All right. So roll ups can be anything from a percent or an average or even a sum. So, for example, a playlist has 57 songs, but the total runtime is 4 hours and 53 minutes. Okay. So it's looking at all the songs runtimes and it's just adding it up. So I can see that this playlist is about 5 hours, which is super helpful, right? Okay. My road trip is 9 hours. I need more songs for this particular playlist. Okay. An example of average might be an employee has many tasks, and I want to show that number of tasks, okay? Currently, an employee has 13 tasks, and that also might be by status, too. An employee has 13 open tasks and 67 completed tasks, right? So we might have multiple numbers. Okay. I might also want to see an employee's average time to complete this tasks or something like that, okay? So that would be an average. All right, so thinking about roll-ups, looking at your nested objects and saying what needs to get pulled up and added or averaged, or do we want to do some maths on any of the attributes from the nested objects? Okay, all right, now I got an easy one for you. Number 10, little break here before I get into some more complicated ones. Description. Some sort of text describing this instance. This is the bio for your user object. This is the description of the event. If you have a point of interest, when I was working with the National Parks Service, we had a point of interest object, and we actually had a couple description fields. So you also want to think about, do you want to get more specific? So for a point of interest, it might be like why we love this point of interest, like why it's worth going to see, but then also what to expect and also safety information. So we might have 3 yellow sticky notes for core content. And you know what? I told you about my core content for the first 2, but I stopped doing that. At the end, I'll go back over and I will say whether it is yellow or pink sticky note. We could play a little game at the end. Okay. But that one description, that is definitely going to be a piece of core content on there. But then again, you do want to think about, does it need to be broken out more for content governance and content strategy? Okay. Do we need to break up the description field into multiple fields? Okay. And give a little bit of content strategy and governance around each of those. And maximum minimum character counts, and maybe even the format. Is it bullets versus a paragraph? Things like that. Okay. So even the easy one, description, has some gotchas there. Okay. So now I'm going to go over 4 attributes. So this is 11 through 14 that often result in conditional logic permutations of that particular object. Okay. So that these are attributes that if value X, things might change about the object. If value Y, things also might change. And this is where we get into intentional shapeshifting. So if you know about shapeshifters, you know that shapeshifters, you often need shapeshifters. You often need your object to permeate and change. What we want to get rid of, and why I say that shapeshifting is an unintuitive object, is we want to get rid of arbitrary shapeshifting, which we do so much. I have an entire mini course on this. If you go to OUX.com/training and scroll down, I don't know the exact URL, we'll put it in the show notes, but I have a training on for fixing your 4 OUX fails, and we go into a deeper dive on shapeshifters. But most systems, you're going to need some intentional shapeshifting. And these are the 4 attributes that are usually going to cause that intentional shapeshifting. Okay, so I'll give you a quick summary. We've got number 11 is type, number 12 is status, number 13 is state, and number 14 is stage. And yes, I am separating status and state and stage. Okay, so let's get into it. So, number 11, type. So, this is getting to level of specificity. Level of specificity is a whole art in OAUX, okay? Is vehicle the object? And then we have types of boat, train, and bus, or do boat, train, and bus need to be their own objects? Okay. Do we have pet and then cat, dog, and bird as types? Okay. So sometimes type becomes an object out of its own. We get into tree systems there. We won't get into this on that podcast. There's so many rabbit holes I want to go down, but I'm trying not to make this too long. But for example, with the National Park Service, we have point of interest, and we also had point of interest type. Okay, as an actual object, all right? Okay, advanced OAUXers. I know you're thinking about tree systems right now. You might be thinking about object bases, but we're not going to get into that. If you want to get into that, OAUX.com/masterclass. All right. Now, the next 3, status, state, and stage, often get used interchangeably a lot. I'm going to propose some extra definition for us as UX designers to be speaking to each other at a higher level of fidelity, to be a little bit more precise, because you know what? We're freaking professionals and we should be more precise about this. That does not mean that we need to relabel a bunch of stuff. Okay. From a user facing perspective, often status is used colloquially for all of these, but I feel like there's difference. Actually, I know there's difference between these 3. So I believe as UX designers, we should be in agreement on what these 3 things. Okay. And so many times objects will often need all 3 of them. All right. And if we call them all status, then it's going to get confusing. All right. Okay. So number 12 is status. Now, I like to use status specifically when I'm talking about whether something is verified or not from some sort of authority approval, some sort of badge that an authority gave. All right. So this is certified organic, whether my OUXers are certified or not. Okay. So that would call that a status of an OUXer, whether you're certified, whether you're not verified, that little blue check mark in social media apps. Okay. Whether that person is verified, that they are exactly who they say they are. Right. So that is usually a human being behind the scenes that is saying that this thing is approved. Okay. So that's what I like to use when I say status. And you can remember that by just status, like that this person has status. All right. That a body of people in authority has agreed that they have some sort of status that we should all know about. Okay. That's how I use status. Okay. Number 13 is state. Now, state is often based on user action. It can often be undone. So this is whether this particular instance has been purchased or not, or it's in my wish list or not, or whether I'm following this person or not. Okay, so when you see a person in a social media app and it says following, I would say that's the state of that instance in relation to you. Okay, so often state can move, you can move back and forth between state. All right. And again, things will change based on state. All right. Maybe if you're following a person or you're friends with a person, you can see more attributes. All right. So, literally, based on state, that particular instance is going to look different than whether it might be in a different state. All right. And the last one, number 14, not the last one in this list because we're going to do 15, but the last one in this set is stage. Okay. Stage, I bet you can guess what I mean by stage. And that is progression through a pipeline or a process. So stage would often have values like draft, submitted, approved, published, expired. Lots of conditional logic is shown here. Like, for example, if your order within an e-commerce store, if the stage is in shipped stage, then you might get a tracking number. So all of a sudden, the tracking number, core content on the order, all right, is going to show only if the stage is in shipped or even delivered. You might still see the tracking number if it's delivered too. Okay. All right. Like I said before, this is often going to be called like something like stage you'll often see this as status. You'll even say in colloquial words, yes, we're going to say order status. All right. Colloquially, yes. But as we are picking apart the structure of these things, I really encourage you to think about status, state, and stage differently, but also not be pedantic about labeling, right? Because there are colloquialisms that we don't necessarily need to impose on our users. Um, but when we're talking to each other, let's clean up our language a little bit. Yeah. Okay. All right. And lastly, number 15. Does this object need a privacy setting? Okay. Is this particular instance public or private? Okay. Is this post that I'm putting on, or this stories on Instagram do this? Is this particular story for my friends or is it for everyone? Okay. If I'm in Strava, I don't know if Strava does this, but runs, right? Or like map my run or something like that. If I have a run that I just did and it's, hey, do you want to post this? Are you posting this to everyone or is this private? Is this just for you? Okay. So often we might have a privacy setting at that object instance level. Okay. All right. If some of this felt a little bit much, no worries. We've got the OUX masterclass for you, right? So aux.com/masterclass. And also, like I said before, if you have follow-up questions, I welcome those. I love the questions. I love knowing like where I could be explaining this better. This is complicated stuff and I'm explaining it without visuals. So wherever you are confused, I want to know. So that's forum.aux.com. And then where you have questions, you can go to the bulletin board and find this podcast and ask the questions there. Or even better, go to the monthly Q&A and put your question there and I will get to it. Whatever the date is, you'll see the date on there. It'll say next Q&A session, November something. I don't know when. I think it's like November 3rd or something like that if you're listening to this in real time. But I do those once a month. And if you are part of the masterclass, you get additional Q&A sessions, 2 additional Q&A sessions every month. So if you're in the masterclass, you literally get 3 opportunities to ask questions and I will get on a video and answer those questions. It's a lot of support. Okay, so let's go back through these and talk about core content versus metadata. And I'm just going to say yellow or pink. So we put core content on yellow and we put our metadata on pink or red sticky notes. Okay, so name/title, yellow all the way. Unique ID, put that on yellow too. Date, which one is that? I'll give you a second, think about it. That's going to be pink. That's going to be metadata. Remember, metadata is stuff that the user is going to want to sort or filter by. Okay, potentially sort or filter by. Theoretically, they could sort or filter by it, all right? Whether they actually do, we'll worry about that when we get to UI. Okay. Author. All right, that's going to be metadata, or very often we're going to be putting that on a blue sticky note for our nested objects. Okay, has one author. All right. Image/video/visual. That's going to be core content, right? That's going to be on yellow. Our pulse check, okay, our amounts, our meters, our popularity, or whether it's trending or the PSI of the valve in our factory. That's also going to be metadata, all right? Think about sorting and filtering. Just show me the valves that are outside of X tolerance, all right? Or show me the trending posts at the top of the list, okay? So that's going to be metadata. Location. I'm going to put that on a pink sticky note too. That also could potentially be on a blue sticky note if our locations do justify being objects, all right? If it's something like a venue or a city or a neighborhood that we want to upgrade, if it has its own structure to it, okay? But location is either going to be on a pink or a blue. All right, number of a key nested object. It's also going to be metadata. Put that on a pink sticky note for me, okay? So again, sorting and filtering. Just show me my spaces that have over 100 members. All right, theoretically, I can't do that in Mighty Networks, but it might be cool though. What are my most popular spaces? So actually, the number of could go into that pulse check. Okay, often those pulse checks could be algorithmic, where you're looking at other pieces of metadata and combining them and talking to a developer about, okay, so what is popularity? When I ask Mighty Networks, what are my most popular spaces? Okay, it's going to look at the number of members. It's going to look at the number of posts within that. So there might be a lot of number ofs rolling up to determine overall activity level. All right, roll-ups. That's going to be metadata too. Put that on a pink sticky note. If it's metadata in the nested object, the roll-up of it is definitely going to be metadata too. Description, we're going to put that on yellow for core content. Type, pink, right? Metadata, status, metadata, state, metadata, stage, metadata. All of those are going to be sortable and filterable, okay? And lastly, privacy setting. Yep, that's going to be metadata too. Okay, and I will say blanket statement here. Some of you might be thinking, wait a second. I think about description, or I think about title and name as metadata. Why are you calling that specifically metadata and not? Okay, so in OUX, we do differentiate. We get a little more precise. We call all of these attributes, all right, and then we categorize our attributes by core content and metadata and nested objects too, okay? But we really, in the A, we focus on those yellow and pink sticky notes, and there's a lot of good reasons that we separate those, all right? One being, I can look at my object map and I could start seeing how somebody might sort and filter. Another reason to separate core content and metadata, my unique identifiers versus my metadata, it's a little bit of a quick and dirty way to see division of responsibility. Yellow sticky notes, in general, we're going to want more content strategy on that. That's user generated often versus system generated, or more of a taxonomy issue, an information architecture issue, and a developer issue. So I can look at my pink and yellow sticky notes. I can get that X-ray vision of my object map, and it's super freaking helpful to start differentiating my sort, filtery metadata versus my writing and image and unique identifier core content. Okay, we talk a lot more about this, of course, in the OUX Masterclass, and I'm super happy, again, to answer questions in the forums. Okay, I hope you enjoyed. Remember, if you want the PDF download of this, OUX.com/resources/attribute discovery. All right, happy OUXing.
Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit objectorientux.com/podcast for show notes. Our soundtrack is Fighter by Ruby Vell, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Happy OUXing!